New challenge, the frigid wilderness. After enduring days of hunger in previous adventures, Ed Stafford now found himself in an extreme cold environment. This time, fortune smiled upon him. He stumbled upon an entire wild goat carcass. Back at camp, he indulged in making smoked jerky from the meat. To top it off, he also caught a massive black rat, effortlessly breaking his cycle of starvation. Following his successful survival in Mongolia's desert, this time, Ed Stafford ventured into the Altai Mountains within the same country. Winter temperatures here could plummet to 20 degrees Celsius, a stark contrast to the scorching desert. After being dropped off at the starting point, his mission was clear: trek 50 km across the mountains, then another 50 km to reach nomadic settlements. But the brutal 80 km/h winds made every step a struggle. With the barren landscape offering no shelter, his biggest concern was finding a place to camp for the night. Soon, a frozen lake blocked his path. Across it lay dense forests, an ideal spot for shelter and food, judging by his experience. Tempted, he decided to cross the ice. At first, it seemed stable, but after a few steps, the ice cracked beneath him. Panicked, he immediately retreated. Falling in would mean certain death within minutes. Forced to detour along the shore, his luck soon changed. At the foot of a mountain, he spotted what appeared to be an abandoned cabin. If he could scavenge supplies here, completing the challenge would be a breeze. Upon arrival, he knocked and called out, "Hello?" No response. His hopes of a free meal vanished. Undeterred, he searched the area and found 2 rusty tin cans and a sheepskin to use as a pillow. With no time to waste, he pressed on. Hours later, as the sun began to set, panic set in. He still had no shelter for the night. In desperation, he settled for a bush as makeshift cover. That night, the temperature plummeted, leaving him shivering uncontrollably. He nearly considered quitting. The next morning, after a quick warm-up, he set off without breakfast. Spotting a small stream, he drank until half full. Not far ahead, a large black rat scurried into a burrow. Seeing this protein-packed opportunity, Ed Stafford devised a plan. Flooding the burrow. Using the tin cans, he scooped water from the stream and poured it into the hole. Soon, the rat bolted out, only to be swiftly caught by his quick reflexes. With his meal secured, he stuffed it into his pocket and continued. After an arduous trek, he finally reached the mountain's base and chose a valley to set up camp. His top priority now was fire. After gathering dry grass and resin-rich branches, he surprised even himself. Instead of friction fire, he pulled out a battery from his pack. The damp conditions forced this unconventional method. By connecting wires to the battery's terminals and touching them to the tinder, flames erupted within moments, far more efficient than rubbing sticks. Next, he butchered the rat, tossed it into the tin can, and boiled it over the fire. While the meat cooked, he built a simple lean-to shelter, topping it with branches. Even if snow fell, this sturdy structure would hold up. After a flurry of activity, the roasted rat was finally ready. True to form as one of Ed Stafford's favorite foods, his beaming face and ravenous chewing said it all. In no time, he devoured every last morsel. Day 3. Ed Stafford shouldered his pack and set off early again. After hours of relentless trekking, another frozen lake appeared before him. Haunted by his previous close call, his expression darkened with worry. But given the high altitude, he made the rare decision not to detour. Time was of the essence. Heart-pounding, he finally reached the opposite shore, only to face a sheer cliff that nearly claimed his life. Realizing the route was too dangerous, he reluctantly turned back, to find a safer path. Then, circling crows caught his attention. Years of survival experience told him there must be carrion nearby. Sure enough, just ahead lay the corpse of a wild goat, mostly picked clean by scavengers. Despite the putrid stench, Ed Stafford stubbornly extracted a piece of offal. The smell was foul, but the meat showed no obvious signs of rot. With some processing, it might still be edible. After 2.5 minutes of deliberation, he changed plans. Haul the goat back to last night's camp, refuel, then continue. Back at camp, he skinned the goat with stones and eagerly roasted some meat for an immediate feast. The rest he sliced into strips and hung over a rack to smoke into jerky. The task consumed the entire day. The next morning, sleet fell as mist shrouded the mountain peaks. Venturing out in such weather would be suicidal. Resigned, Ed Stafford gnawed on roasted goat leg in camp. Between bites, he foraged for wild garlic, because meat without garlic is only half as delicious. One mouthful later, a blissful grin spread across his face. By afternoon, the weather still hadn't improved. Boredom set in as he loitered around camp. Day 5. Finally clear skies. Ed Stafford packed up with renewed vigor. His smoked goat jerky weighed nearly a kilogram, enough to last days without hunting. With supplies secured, he marched out confidently. The protein boost supercharged his progress, until a misstep sent him tumbling downslope, howling in pain. Worse than the rocky terrain was the backtracking required to retrieve his camera. At the summit, his heart sank. Endless snowy ridges stretched ahead. Deep snow drastically slowed his pace. At times, he simply slid downhill on his backside. Hours of trudging through powder left his muscles screaming. At one point, he collapsed and wriggled forward like a worm. To make matters worse, snow glare seared his eyes. Frustrated, he resolved to camp overnight and resume at dawn when the snow hardened. With practiced motions, he carved out a snow cave, a one-bedroom suite to avoid freezing solid. Lining it with the goat skin, he couldn't help but smirk at this unexpected luxury. As darkness fell, he vented to the camera, before turning in early. The next morning, Ed Stafford crawled out of his snow cave at dawn. As expected, the hardened snow made trekking much easier. But before long, the rising sun softened the snow again, plunging him back into yesterday's nightmare. Waist-deep powder made forward progress impossible. Forced to worm his way forward once more, he spent 2.5 hours, crawling like a snail through the snow. At this pace, he'd freeze to death long before reaching his destination. To make matters worse, his goat jerky rations were gone. Food was virtually non-existent here. Even the unshakable Ed Stafford felt a pang of despair. After careful consideration, he reluctantly pulled out his satellite phone. Dragging his pack toward the extraction point, he admitted defeat. The first time in his survival career, nature had bested him. When the rescue team arrived, a physically and mentally exhausted Ed Stafford climbed into their vehicle. This challenge ended in failure. New challenge, the Darien Gap. As the saying goes, Ed Stafford starts every adventure starving for days. But this time, his meals were passable. When thirsty, he sipped his signature, all-natural boba tea, muddy water with floating debris. When hungry, he munched on his favorite cucumber-flavored jungle fruit. He even caught 2 juvenile crucian carp and simmered them with wild bananas into a nourishing stew, turning survival into a gourmet experience. As the only bushcrafter, with a gleaming bald head, Ed Stafford now faced Panama's Darien Gap. Bordering Colombia, this swampy rainforest harbors armed gorillas, venomous snakes, and scorpions, making it as dangerous as it looks. Unfazed, Ed Stafford arrived by speedboat. From the moment he stepped ashore, an uneasy tension gripped him. Watching the boat disappear, he faced his mission: reach a village 30 kilometers away in 10 days. His gear remained the classic trio: machete, fire starter, and camera. This time, he brought a drone to avoid backtracking for footage. Using the sun's position and stick shadows, he quickly plotted his course. Before setting off, he scavenged the beach, scoring 2 perfect fire logs and a rusty metal shard. With some sharpening, it became his prized tetanus blade. Spotting a river aligned with his route, he decided to follow its banks. This allowed constant navigation checks and instant water access. Hours into the jungle, flat terrain gave way to steep slopes. As dusk fell, exhaustion forced him to camp riverside. He scraped together a leaf bed and collapsed into uneasy sleep. Day 2. After gulping down river water, he marched onward empty, stomached. A 7-meter waterfall blocked his path. The slippery rock face was too risky, so he detoured inland, only to lose the river's sound completely. The higher he climbed, the weaker he grew. Dehydration and hunger gnawed at him. Finally reaching a summit, he ignored the breathtaking view. His parched throat cared only about finding water. Descending blindly, he suddenly spotted unfamiliar fruits, dangling from a tree. Desperation overrode caution. He bit into one. Crunch. To his surprise, the crisp flesh tasted remarkably like cucumber. Gorging on several, he replenished both fluids and calories. Refreshed, Ed Stafford continued his march with renewed vigor. After another 2.5 hours of arduous trekking, Ed Stafford finally reached the foot of the mountain, only to be greeted by a dried-up riverbed. The sight left him visibly frustrated, but drawing from years of survival experience, he knew the vines growing along the riverbed might still contain some moisture. Without hesitation, he pulled out his tetanus blade and began hacking at the vines. Perhaps due to the dry season, they were completely parched. Not a single drop of water emerged. Defeated, he reluctantly continued his search for water. Just as dehydration threatened to overwhelm him, he stumbled upon a stagnant puddle. Judging by its appearance, it likely contained half the periodic table of elements. His parched throat battled his common sense, but ultimately, discipline prevailed. He dug a hole beside it for basic filtration. As semi-periodic table-infused water seeped in, Ed Stafford resisted drinking immediately, waiting for sediment to settle first. While waiting, he scavenged for containers. Given the area's frequent use by armed groups and smugglers, discarded trash was likely. His efforts paid off. Several wild plastic bottles materialized in the jungle, though only one had a cap. Filling it with filtered water, he took an experimental sip. The texture was surprisingly smooth, though it tasted distinctly like plaster water. Day 3. After a morning of hiking, he'd covered less than 3 kilometers. Progress through dense rainforest was agonizingly slow. Every step required vigilance. A single cut from thorny plants could quickly fester in this environment. Grumbling, he pressed on until salvation appeared. A pristine jungle stream. He plunged in face first, gulping down water far superior to yesterday's batch. Noticing fish darting beneath the surface, he marked the spot for tomorrow's fishing. Darkness was falling. That night, he vented to the camera again. Days of involuntary fasting had drained his energy reserves. Tomorrow, fish would be prioritized. Fishing day. At dawn, Ed Stafford eyed the fish hungrily. No more patience. He transformed his plastic bottle into a trap, cutting off the top and inverting it to create a funnel entrance. For bait, he tossed in captured ants and frogs. After setting multiple traps, he turned to fire-making, fashioning a hand drill from his shoelaces, and scavenged driftwood. The humid jungle fought back. An hour of furious drilling finally produced a wisp of smoke. His trademark manic grin flashed as he nurtured the ember into flames. The effort burned precious calories, making the fish trap's inspection urgent. Trap 1 held a single unlucky fish. Trap 2 delivered a bonus, 2 more. Without bothering to gut them, he tossed the fish directly into the flames. Sizzling fat announced dinner. Cue the Ed Stafford mukbang. Crunch. The taste? Irrelevant when starvation looms. 300 precious calories later, he felt reborn. Back pain vanished. Legs revitalized. In this moment, he crowned himself the ultimate bushcraft king. Day 5. Time flew by, and Ed Stafford woke up handsome as ever. He set off early, with over half the challenge completed. However, the river's flow didn't align with his destination. Reluctantly, he plunged back into the jungle. 5 hours later, his water supply was nearly exhausted. His expression grew increasingly grim. No question, finding water became his top priority. 2 more hours passed. The last drop in his bottle was gone. His mind fixated on one thing: water. Just as desperation peaked, a pristine jungle river appeared. No time for celebration. He flopped straight in to cool off. Nearby, signs of human activity caught his eye. Miraculously, he found a discarded pot, vastly superior to his rusty tin can. Determined to reward himself, he prepared to catch fish. First, he sharpened a stick into a spear point with his tetanus blade. Then, he lashed it to another stick with his backpack's elastic band, creating a makeshift fishing bow. Confident, he waded into the water. Whether due to inexperience or bad luck, hours of stabbing yielded nothing. Near dusk, a sudden burst of laughter escaped him. A finger-sized fish dangled from his spear. Emboldened, he soon landed another. But the surprises didn't end there. A banana tree laden with fruit stood by the river. Without hesitation, he unleashed a flurry of punches at the trunk. The tree toppled. Triumphant, he returned to camp with his haul. Fish chunks and roughly chopped bananas, simmered into a hearty stew. Half an hour over the fire, dinner was served. Day 6. Haunted by past dehydration, Ed Stafford guzzled water before dawn. Then, back into the jungle. Day 7. The grueling pace left him drenched in sweat, malnutrition taking its toll. As the trees thinned, a banana plantation emerged. Beyond it, a massive river stretched before him. The production team had hinted the village lay near such a river. Whether this was the one or not, he drank his fill first. Just then, he spotted Odibo, preparing to transport bananas. A wave, a greeting, and Ed Stafford boarded the boat home. Challenge complete. As the undisputed king of wilderness survival, Ed Stafford never fails to feast, even in the harshest conditions. This time, he enjoyed tender, fall-off-the-bone roasted frog, followed by live cicada sashimi. The crowning achievement? A 2.5-pound wild chicken, stewed with wild ginger and roots, in a bamboo tube. Jungle bamboo chicken stew. For dessert, charcoal grilled rat. What was supposed to be a survival show nearly turned into a gourmet episode. The mission. For this challenge, Ed Stafford would survive 10 days in Thailand's lawless Golden Triangle. No food, no water, not even hair. His backpack contained only emergency gear and filming equipment. Under the scorching sun, his first task was clear: find water. But the rugged terrain made navigation risky. Descending blindly could mean getting lost. Instead, he used his backpack as a central marker, scouting the surrounding valleys methodically. An hour later, he'd found nothing but bamboo. Not a drop of water. Dehydration was setting in. Just as he began worrying about taking the wrong path, he finally spotted several banana trees in the distance. Of course, Ed Stafford wouldn't miss such a find, especially the small black bananas hanging from them. Without his survival knife, he resorted to punching the trunk repeatedly. Falling debris provided a quick snack, enough to half-fill his stomach. Grunting with effort, he continued hammering the tree until it toppled over. The massive bunch of bananas could last days, or so he thought. One bite revealed rock-hard fruit, nearly damaging his recently fixed front teeth. Splitting one open, he found the flesh white with black streaks, clearly a recipe for disaster if eaten. Reluctantly, he discarded the entire bunch. Suddenly, thunder rumbled overhead. With no shelter prepared, his bald forehead wrinkled with worry. Too late to build one now, he improvised by fashioning a rain-resistant tunic from banana bark. Once dressed, he hauled a section of the trunk uphill, returning to his original spot, just as lightning flashed. Exhausted, he smashed open the trunk to drink its water. As thunder grew closer, he had no desire to become a lightning rod. Retreating to a sheltered mid-slope spot, he scattered leaves as bedding and resigned himself to a miserable night. Day 2. Though the storm never came, the plunging temperatures left him shivering violently. Breakfast was decided instantly. An unlucky cicada met its end between his teeth. After the light meal, he set off in a new direction for water. Along the way, he sampled unidentified fruits without hesitation. Their sour taste barely slowed him down. Soon, a grin spread across his face. A tiny stream appeared. No time for filtration. He drank straight from the ground. Rehydrated and energized, he scouted upstream for a campsite. An open clearing proved ideal. With the location secured, he searched the stream for tools. A razor-sharp stone became his perfect cutting implement. Next stop, the bamboo grove he'd spotted earlier. In survival terms, bamboo might as well be gold. Its versatility unmatched. But stone tools made harvesting agonizingly slow. Sawing, pulling, and hauling the poles back consumed over 5 grueling hours. Back at camp, he notched the bamboo, lashed the pieces together, and thatched the roof with banana leaves. His luxury jungle villa stood complete, until mosquitoes launched relentless attacks. Disgusted, he bathed in a cool spring, emerging refreshed and preening for the camera. Exhaustion claimed him as night fell. Day 3. With shelter done, fire became the priority. Bamboo scrapings formed tinder, rubbed vigorously between stone and bamboo. After 10 relentless minutes, smoke curled upward, his fastest fire starting yet. Flames soon followed. Ever resourceful, he split bamboo segments into water containers, boiled their contents over the fire, and added mysterious foraged ingredients. The resulting brew brought deep satisfaction. Now that he had secured the 3 essentials for survival, Ed Stafford finally turned his attention to finding food. He ventured out of the woods into an open area and decided to set up a stone-based rat trap. Any unlucky rodent that triggered the heavy rock would be instantly crushed. For bait, he simply skewered a grasshopper. Day 4. So far, Ed Stafford had only eaten insects and roots. Unsurprisingly, none of his traps had worked. Refusing to give up, he waded into the water, stooping low and feeling around. To his surprise, he managed to grab a frog. After proudly showing it off to the camera, he tried to skewer it with a stick, only for the clever amphibian to play dead and vanish the moment he looked away. Furious, he thrashed around in the water again. Luck struck. This time, an even plumper frog. Learning from his earlier mistake, he made sure this one met its end swiftly. Back at camp, he roasted it over the fire. The tender thigh meat fell right off the bone, so rich and flavorful that his ravenous eating spoke volumes. This protein-packed meal easily outclassed beef. Bolstered by his success, he set up a bird snare next, using a caterpillar as bait. Now, it was just a waiting game. That night, hailstones the size of fingers pelted down. Grateful for his sturdy shelter, Ed Stafford still found sleep impossible amid the deafening noise. At first light, he checked his traps and found a rat crushed beneath the rock. His face lit up with delight. Back at camp, he devoured his prize in the dark, unable to distinguish which parts he was eating. Not a scrap went to waste. Meat, bones, even the head disappeared into his hungry stomach. For once, he went to bed reasonably full. The next morning, he started the day with a leech sashimi appetizer. Now that all 4 survival essentials were secured, Ed Stafford allowed himself to enjoy the finer things. For easier water access, he crafted a bamboo canteen, smoothing the edges and adding a lid. Next, he fashioned a shower head from bamboo, then gleefully practiced his spiral orb technique. Feeling invincible, he grew overconfident. Day 8. To spice things up, he decided to explore the surrounding area. But first, he needed a new stone-cutting tool. After hours of searching, he found the perfect rock, lashed it to a stick, and created a formidable survival blade. Chopping down banana trees became effortless. Day 9. Before setting off, he made one last trap check. From a distance, he spotted an unlucky wild chicken hanging in his snare. That signature grin spread across his face. Another feast awaited. After packing up, he hit the trail, foraging for carbs along the way. Wild greens and ginger joined his provisions. Exhausted from the trek, he quickly plucked and butchered the chicken, cutting it into even pieces, before stuffing them into a bamboo tube. As the meal cooked, he couldn't suppress his glee. When the bamboo chicken finally steamed to perfection, the aroma alone was intoxicating. The wild ginger elevated the flavor to new heights. Between ecstatic bites, Ed Stafford kept muttering, "Oh my God." Stuffed and satisfied, he launched into one of his signature survival lectures. At this moment, he was undoubtedly the most legendary bushcraft king alive. The final day. As the plane came into view, Ed Stafford boarded it, marking the successful conclusion of this challenge.